Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Today, let's go to Stockholm. Would that be fun for you? I haven't been to Stockholm in maybe 20 years, but we are going to look at some trees, or at least think about trees and talk about trees. And we have somebody here in Toronto who's also a tree man. And so we're going to talk about Toronto trees as well as the innovative approach that we're going to mostly consider, which has been adopted by the Swedes in Stockholm. So this is Bjorn Embren. He is the man who was in charge of developing this very extensive planting of trees throughout Stockholm that kind of made waves because people in other parts of Scandinavia got so enthusiastic that they've adopted his methods and have also planted trees in some of the other major cities of the north. Here in Toronto with me is Todd Irvine, who is an arborist. He's a man who actually goes out and cuts limbs and prunes and fertilizes and takes people on walks and does things to individually acquaint us with trees. So good morning, Todd. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good to meet you. And in Ottawa is a pugwashite friend. This is Robin Collins, who is a very important member of the pugwash community. And we've been holding conversations about urban forestry for several months now, with the idea that we're going to ask the pugwash group to lobby the Canadian government to promote the use of urban forestry among other things, as a way of handling our increasingly hot climate, hot cities. So I became more aware of the Stockholm thing several months ago when I was talking to a guy, Albert Bates, in the US, who is a big enthusiast for biochar. And he was mentioning the work that Bjorn did in planting on a large scale, planting trees throughout Stockholm. And I'd like for you to just give us a run through, if you can, Bjorn, about what you did that was so special in Stockholm.
The basic about Stockholm solution is using of shifted stones. We call it macadam in Sweden, and it's a assorted stone material that's we started to use with 90 to 110 millimeters big stones that we put down in the ground. And it all started with a visit to a university in Hanover, where they have tested different kinds of soils and plant bed constructions and trying to see where the root system developed at the best way. And after 10 years, they excavated all these test beds and realized that it was in the open stone material that they got the best root developments. So it's really a long time research work that they did. They measured all the root system and the stems and the leaves and everything to see where they got the best results. So even if they had the best compost soils that you can think of, all the different kind they could get hold of in Germany, it was always the stone mix that they got the best results from. So I visited them in the university and got a lecture. And after that, I went back to Stockholm and tried to convince all the hardcore civil engineers in the traffic department of Stockholm that this was the best thing you ever could do in a city to get the trees to grow. And of course, they just shook their head and said, no way, you're going to make it. But then things happened as it always does for me. I just passed the street and looked down in the excavation shaft and saw something at the bottom of that shaft that was big, solid rock stones put on top of each other. And it looked exactly what the German had talked about in Hannover University. So I went back to the traffic department and asked the civil engineers what it was in that excavation. And they suddenly shined up and looked extremely happy and said, "Oh, that's the best way of building streets. That's what we have done, the best streets in Stockholm for the last 100 years." And so that was the opening for the whole project in Stockholm, that I passed that excavation, saw the stones in the bottom, and could explain, so they could connect to this solution, that it was the same thing as when they build roads. So that gave me the first opportunity to test it, because they, when they were so happy about talking about this solution, I asked, couldn't I do some tests anyway? Yes, of course you can. And then they let me do it in a sidewalk just to try it. So that was the opening of the whole thing. So the research in Hannover is the basic of all things that we do in Stockholm now about the road system developments. And the first 10 years we were doing it with this kind of big stones, selected stone material that we put down in the hole in the for the plant bed and compacted. So we got a strong construction that can hold for any traffic you can think of, buses, trucks, anything. Can take any loads you want, and still you have 35 to 40% of porosity in the material. So you can't destroy the porosity in these plant beds. It's impossible. And it will stay like that for at least 100 years, because it's the same construction for trams and for trains and everything all around the world, really. And when we do excavation in Stockholm, we sometimes find old tram construction in the ground, and it's made of this kind of big stones. And the trees that are standing close to it always choose that material before the compacted soil things that's on the other side. So it always shows this open material, because the gas exchange is working, and the infiltration of water is much easier, and the road system can travel along this stone construction of the old tram or railway tracks. So we really see things that show us that it works for a long time, this way of construction. So that is basic. Stones put on top of stones, compacted, and then you can build a closed surface with asphalt or stones or concrete or anything. But the problem that appeared for me in Stockholm was that the civil engineers didn't want to have any open space or open material so we could infiltrate water and get the gas exchange to work. So we had to use a well to infiltrate stormwater or rainwater, and to get the gas exchange to work in our plant beds. And so we made had a local blacksmith to make a well, and it became a standard in Stockholm to use that kind of wells in hard surface. And the water helped.
I want to question you, because
yes.
I think I've seen a picture of that. What I saw was you had dug a trench alongside the street, and you put these big rocks in there.
Yeah.
And then you covered it with, I don't remember what, but it wasn't dirt. It was like a compost or biochar.
Compost and biochar,
And every so often, in between, every not every tree, but every few trees.
Every second tree.
You have like a container. It looks like a container that I guess that people come and put water in that container, and then
it's just rainwater. It's just rainwater.
It's rainwater, and then it goes from there down into the.
It's like a layer of clean stones on the top, like an infiltration layer. That the gas exchange works is a lung for the planting bed and the infiltration layer. So when it comes a lot of rain, it can take a lot of rain. It's really a good way of counteract flooding in cities and things like that. So yeah, and the rain also has
Excuse me,
the rain.
when you call that a well, I would call
Yeah.
that a cistern. If you're actually
Yeah.
capturing the water, you're not bringing water up from the subsoil. You are.
No.
No,
No.
you're capturing the rainwater. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, anyway, it then flows along this trench to
Yeah,
this.
try to collect as much water as we can. Stockholm is rather dry. We got 600 millimeters of rain every year, so it's a dry city. And so we really need to catch as much water as we can. So we take roof water from the buildings around the sidewalks and from the sidewalk and the streets. So we collect street water, sidewalks water, and roof water. So we really unload the pressure on the sewer system, really a lot. And so the water company had a hard time to understand how much water we took away because we take away a lot of stormwater with these kind of plant beds.
Okay, now tell me about the biochar part.
Yeah. The first 10 years we were using ordinary soil. We compacted the stone and then we flushed down the soil between the stone, so we didn't get any compaction of the soil. So that was the whole thing about this construction, that we compacted the stone, so everyone was happy about how strong it was as a construction. And then we flushed down soil between the stones, and you could only fill it up to 25% of the porosity. So you always had a lot of open space between the stones together with the soils. And after 10 years, we made some experiments, and I wanted to try charcoal for barbecue charcoal, just to keep humidity or water holding capacity high on the surface when we made some tests with just clean stone beds. And we got such a good results for the grass when they had this 50% charcoal in the soil mixture for the grass. So we tried it on the other side of the street for trees. We took 50% soil, 50% barbecue charcoal, and mixed that together. And we got results that we hadn't seen ever before. Not even in the nurseries they could get such good results. And we were just shocked about the effect. Afterwards, I can explain why it happened, because we're using these kind of water bags, you know them, where you water trees with bags, these water bags that keep 75 liters of water. And you put them around the tree, so it slowly penetrates the soil with water slowly for over 8 hours. And so we used that for that kind of trees. And we had this mixture of 50% biochar and compost. And in normal case, it would have been a big mistake, because so much biochar or charcoal in the ground together with soil, it wouldn't be enough with nutrients in it. It couldn't grow, because the biochar would take away all the nutrients from the soil. And so the tree shouldn't get any. But we used these water bags with nutrients, 2 ppm, parts per million of nutrients in these water bags. And they got 75 liters every week for the trees. So they had constant supply of water, constant supply of nutrients. And if it was some left of the nutrients or some left of the water, it will be stored in the biochar. So it wasn't any shortage of water or nutrients at any time for the first 2 years when we had planted these trees. That's why we got the extreme effect from the first time. So we were sheer luck, because if you had used that water bags with nutrients, it should have been a real bad outfall. But this is how things happen in the world sometimes. It's sheer luck. So after that, we started to think about what we could do with biochar, and the years to follow was really testing different mixes, different kinds of nutrients with the biochar and everything like that. And in the end, we came up with the idea that we should start to produce our own biochar, because we couldn't get hold of enough volumes of charcoal. It was charcoal at that time. We couldn't get hold of in a biochar in the beginning. So we couldn't get hold of it. So we started to buy from Finland and from Germany just to be able to build plant beds with biochar and make all this.
Did they make theirs from city waste dumps or what?
Yeah. So that was our idea. So we presented it for the politicians, and they said okay, gave us okay to make a what you call it? Some paper about our thoughts about how this could be applied in Stockholm. But before that paper was ready, we got this question if we wanted to participate in the Bloomberg Philanthropies competition about future cities. And I said, yes, of course. There were 6 different things that were competing in Stockholm, and we got to represent Stockholm in this competition. So
but what was the whole thing about? Bloomberg was.
It was future cities. How you can make future cities work? What you say?
I think it's called C4 cities, and our former mayor David Miller was the head of it at one point, and now he's starting an institute for them, so that they're running information to share with all the cities around the world. They offered a prize to cities that came up with innovative suggestions. Okay.
Yeah, so we got the second prize. I was extremely disappointed, but after a while, it was okay. The money was enough for us to build our first biochar machine. So it worked for a couple of years, and the winning concept was that we took care of the garden waste from the citizen of Stockholm that came with it to the recycle centers, and they got biochar back when they left the garden waste at the recycle center. So that was the winning concept, that you get the people in Stockholm to participate in the climate fight, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been a fantastic journey to be in, and it's so great to be part in something that's really good for the environment. I mean, in so many levels, when you start to make plant beds like this, you infiltrate stormwater and you use material in the plant bed that clean the stormwater take care of the nutrients, clean some of the pollution from the roads and everything, instead of that it goes straight out to the lakes around Stockholm or the Baltic Sea and things like that. So it's one thing after the other that just say, this is the right way. You can't make it better than this. It just feels so great to be a part of it.
Well, that's wonderful, and I think we have all more or less concluded that planting trees in the city will not very, very rapidly do much to reduce CO2 from the atmosphere. No, it's not going to make a big dent in global warming, but it will do a lot of other services for us, such as cleaning the air. And I hadn't thought about cleaning the water so that it doesn't pollute the Great Lakes and things like that.
For Stockholm, it's so extremely important, because the Lake of Mälaren that Stockholm is situated by is our drinking water that we use for drinking water in Stockholm. All people in Stockholm drink the water from that lake, and we are letting our polluted water from the streets straight out like that. So it's so extremely important that we can take care of it before. So we put it into the ground and let all the life in the ground take care of the pollution and nutrients that come with it.
I guess what you're talking about is structural soil. Is that correct? Like,
yeah.
And so, what is the size of the stone that you're using?
In the first 10 years, we were using 90 to 110 millimeters. It's like a big ball, like this, a handball, or what you call it, like this. And that was because of what the civil engineers were so happy about, the construction that I saw in the excavation. So I asked, okay, I take that size so they feel comfortable, but with what I'm doing. I must find ways to get through the system from the beginning. So I had to get people pleased that works with construction. So that's why we had that big size from the beginning. But over the years, we found out that with tests, it was actually the same strength of the construction if you use 32 to 63 millimeters or 32 to 90 millimeters. And we could pre-mix it if we kept the mixture of biochar and compost at most 15% in the mixture. It wouldn't make any difference to the stability in the stone mixture. So you could put that mixture stones and 15% of biochar and compost and compact it with really hard, and you will still have open material, and you don't destroy the construction with that low amount of biochar and compost. So that's, I would say it's perhaps 90% of all the plant beds that build now in a hard surface are made of this smaller fraction of stone, 32 to 63, 32 to 90 millimeters instead. And it goes so much faster if you have pre-mixed and can compact it. So half time compared to the old way where we flush down between the stones instead.
And do you find, like, I mean, what I've read about structural soil is that it works very well for the first number of years, but at some point you lose soil volume because there's only so much.
That's just clean bullshit. I mean, I promise you, if you go to any city in the world and look at the old parts, the old trees that have been standing there for 100 years or more, no one is giving them any nutrients or anything, and they will survive for extremely long time. And what's the great thing about trees is that they take energy from the sun and put it into the ground through the root system, and they work together with all the life in the ground, and they grow and they die, and they grow and they die. Root system and all the bacteria and the insects and the worms, everyone will grow and die, and they feed from the sun through the trees. So you get much, the organic material in this stone mixture increases. It don't decreases, it increases. It's exactly the same thing that's happened out in the nature. Same thing. You have life in the ground, and you have to support the life in the ground with water and energy from the trees. And the gas exchange is one of the absolute most important things to get oxygen into the ground. It's for the mycorrhizas that needs oxygen, and all the insects and the bacteria, everything that support trees and works together with the trees need oxygen and water in the ground. And that's what's the really success about this thing. It's about the stone, the structure that are kept over the years, and the growth of the humus part in the ground. So it's self-supporting system. It's like it's nature.
Mass forests are usually primarily soil. Yes, there's forests with stones, but I think it certainly makes sense in this application. But I don't want listeners to then think that all their backyard should be big piles of stones. I mean, yes, when you're trying to bear loads of trucks and you want compaction and you're concerned about the loads, absolutely. But I think our goal should still be, when possible, to be having soil volume and just soil with humus layer and mulch. Would you?
And this is what it is. It's a mineral part and it's a humus part. It's exactly as soil is built up, but it's just bigger fraction, and it gives you opportunity to take loads, and it gives you opportunity to don't get compacted, because that's the biggest problem people have in the cities, to how to keep the ground open for the water to infiltrate instead of go out in the sewer system, and to have the gas exchange to work. If you have a big park and you have all these what do you call it, the happenings, you have music and you have sunbathing, and you have these lawn mowers running all over the place all the time, and you compact ordinary soil extremely. The stressed soil all the time, and you have to open up the soil every third year or something to get the grass to grow and things like that. So it's really an easy solution to use this kind of selected stone material to keep the ground open. Sometimes after a while, if you have it on grass or in a different plantation, the surface can get compacted after some years, but you will always have it open in the ground if you use this kind of materials. And what it is waste. It's waste material that we're using. Leftover materials, the garden waste, biochar from garden waste, and stones, recycled concrete, recycled bricks, recycled tiles, any local material that you can use, instead of like it is in Sweden, you're using sand, you're using clay, and you're using peat moss. And that is letting CO2 out in the, if you take peat moss from the ground, you will let the carbon dioxide go out in the atmosphere. And that,
I'm a little confused. I'm interested in what people talk about regenerative farming. One of the things they talk about is do not plow, do not turn the soil over, because if you do that, you're going to let the CO or the carbon in the soil escape as CO2 in the air, and that's what we want to keep from happening. But isn't that incompatible with what you said about you want to have the gases coming into, the oxygen coming into the roots and so on? How are you going to get the oxygen in there without having the CO2 escape?
A good question. I mean, you have a living soil, and it's working like any soil from the beginning. And I don't have an answer of it, but you're not turning the soil around. You're not killing the life so you get this CO2 to just escape because decaying material. I think it's more like a closed system in the ground. If you don't move it around. It's the same in my aquarium. I have biochar in my aquarium, and I have when you see the layers through the glass, you can see how different layers have different kind of life. So you shouldn't move around it, because then the life that's up here get to the ground, to the bottom, and then they die, and then you will lose a lot of. I think it's the same thing, that if you disturb the soil, you will get a lot of organisms that will die and let CO2 go. I think it is like that.
But how do you get the oxygen in? You said the gases. You want to get it down deep and into the roots, right? How do you get in there without turning over the soil?
Same as in nature. water goes down. So you have water to fill up the planting bed, and then it slowly sinks down in the ground, and then it takes the oxygen with it. First, it presses out the carbon or the bad gases, and when it sinks, it takes new oxygen down. So that's how it works out in nature.
Okay.
And it's the same with our plant beds.
Okay.
If I could ask a question, I just want to drill down a little bit with Todd's question. Why wouldn't people crush stone for their backyards instead of having soil as they normally do? So a couple of questions here. One, is what you're proposing good for only certain kinds of vegetation and trees? I think the supposition is that there's more nutrients within soil than there is with a mixture of material plus stone. Aside from what nutrients the crushed stone might provide, if it, calcium and so on, or whatever the kind of stone it is. So, I mean, that's another question. What kind of stone are we talking about here? But
Yeah, they're different.
there does seem to be a confusion that comes to my mind, which is, if this is such a great project, and I mean, it sounds good. I mean, you've been doing it for decades, so what's the downside?
If you have soil and you don't have any stress on the soil, use old soils. But anyway, you can always put biochar in the soil, and you will get better soil than you ever had before. That's basic, but you should use when you can use. You should use soil when you can use soil. When you don't have these stress moments. I mean, you must remember, because when you build new parks in big cities around the world, have you seen the machines that working with the soils and put out the soils? And they're 25 tons weight of the machines, and they do the excavation, and they run around with these 25-ton machines on the ground, where the root system in the future should penetrate. And then they put some industrial made soil on top of it, and they put it out with this this machinery. What do you call this thing that you put out soil with?
Grader?
What?
There's a grader?
I know. The thing that lift out the soil, they use the same heavy iron thing to finish the surface, and the pressure they put on the surface with that on the soil is just destroying the soils. And the soil that you buy from industrial soil you buy is dead from the beginning. So it can't recover the first year, because there is no life in the soil that you buy. So the soil can't recreate the aggregate in the soil structure if you have compacted it from the beginning. And so that's a big problem. And it's really hard to get things growing when you use big machinery in that way.
And tell me how many trees you planted. I read someplace that Stockholm planted something like 40,000 trees in this operation. Is that right?
Yeah, at least, it is.
At least.
I mean, I think for this 20 years, you could calculate something like 1,000 trees every year over the whole period of a little bit more than 20 years. So it's a lot of trees that we have been planting, and we have made mistakes, and try to learn from the mistakes. And that's why we made this handbook, to try to really show people how to make it, and to give decision makers the knowledge of what you can do with this kind of construction.
Are some trees better for this project than others? I mean, in terms of root shallowness.
Not if it is new trees, then it's no difference between trees. But if you are rebuilding planting beds around old trees that are 100 years old, they react differently. And it's a little bit how the structure was before. If they really have a circular root system that can't expand anymore. And especially maples, acer is really a problem when they are extremely old. But oak trees, Tilias, lime trees, and things are exploding if you give them a new plant bed like this, if they're 50, 100 years old or something like that, and been standing still for 50 years, so you can restart them immediately.
Really?
And magnolias.
How deep is are the layers? I mean, how deep is the deepest? Yeah.
I mean, the ordinary construction we make is 1 meter deep, 3 feet deep, and then the first feet is the construction for the surface. So it's around 60 to 80 centimeters planting bed, but they're always connected as many as possible. So along a block, it's usually 10 to 12 trees connected to each other. So the root system can travel from one side of the block to the other side if it's more water at that part of the block. And the mycorrhiza can infiltrate everywhere. And you get so much surface area on the sides and on the bottom of this kind of solution. So the trees will always find what they need. The limiting factor is always the water. And Stockholm is always too little water. And but once every 5-10 years, we get to places where it's too much water, and then you have to select your trees that can stand a lot of water. That's my first carrot in biochar stone mix. It's after a while, when we had made this for a hard surface, we realized that it was the same problem with ordinary soil. So we started to use this as ordinary soil instead. And then the size of stone was 2 to 6 millimeters or 4 to 8 millimeters. And we have 25% of biochar and compost in the mixes. So I took away some of the soil in my vegetable garden and started to grow carrots and potatoes and things in this mixture. So this is how it looks in most cities in Europe. You have concrete slabs or some kind of stone slabs or asphalt on top. And then you have setting sands, asphalt, and a bearing layer of crushed stones, 0 to 63 millimeter, heavily compacted. And this is the problem. You can't get the gas exchange board, and you can't infiltrate storm water, rainwater in this construction. That's the basic problems. Mm-hmm. And this is how it looks when we excavate an old place with trees that been standing and haven't grown for anything over perhaps 20 or 50 years or something like that. And it's just mixed material, nothing to do with a good planting bed. So the trees are finding some cracks in the ground and put out the roots that support the whole tree. So one root could support a whole tree. And they're so sensitive to excavation when they look like this. Mm-hmm. So this is an ordinary site in Stockholm. If you take a sidewalk and excavate it, you will find this kind of cables and pipes and everything. And that's been put down there over the last 100, 150 years. And so it's a problem to really find a way to build a plant bed. But this is so adaptable to different things in the ground. You just put out the stones, compact it, and it doesn't matter if it's pipes or cables or anything or other construction. You just follow the open volume and put the stones there. So it's no really problem with installation in the ground. You can always find places to put out this stone mixture. Mm-hmm. So this is what I talked about, the big machinery that destroys the ground when you build parks. This always looks like this when big companies are building parks in Stockholm and out in Europe. They're driving around with their trucks on the ground, and then they put out the soil and compact it. So they had to, in this place, they had to remake all this construction because it wouldn't grow afterwards. This is also common in parks in Stockholm. They have these events going on and a lot of people running around. And this is after people have been using the ground, they have to replant it. And this is how it looks after 6th year if you don't do any extra plant beds. Just try to plant trees in an ordinary compacted soil. It won't work. And this is just to show how hard the material is when you have these ordinary soils that get compacted after a few years. And it's so easily to understand that stormwater can't penetrate this in the summer. If it's completely dry and it comes a heavy rain, it will just run out in the street and go to the sewer system. So I tried to pinpoint the 10 most important factors that are shown in this, just to make it easy for people to understand what's the important things you have to think of. You have to have solution for all these 10 things. So this is the first time we made this pre-mixed stone with biochar, and it was before we used compost. So this is just biochar, mineral nutrients and stones pre-mixed, and it works well too. So this is
do you find you don't have to replenish the nutrients over time, that it's a self sustaining process after a certain period?
Yeah, it is. It is. So we support them with nutrients the first 2 or 3 years, and then we just leave them to their self. And this is what the first the Stockholm's basic solution is. They have this big kind of stones in the bottom, and then you have the infiltration layer of the smaller stones, and they have the biochar compost mix in the bigger stones and nothing in the upper part. And you see what I call the well or inlet for stormwater, and get the gas exchange to work. So that's a close up to the inlet and how it's placed in the infiltration layer. So this is the way it looks like on the surface after we have sealed the surface with concrete slabs. And you see we have this concave concrete solution that collects as much water as possible and is connected to the pipes from the roofs. So we get as much water as we can. And this is just outside Stockholm, a suburb, and it's an open solution with this small kind of stone fraction instead. And we have direct inflow of the water from the surrounding areas. And so you don't need any solution for an inlet to the plant beds in this way. You just get overflow from the sidewalks and from the streets in some places. So in this, you can plant anything you want. You can plant trees, perennials, shrubs, or anything, or flowers, whatever you want. So this is an example of, this was planted the driest year ever in Stockholm, ever measured. And still it established so fast. And this is, I don't think, 2 years after the driest year ever. So it's a good result if you think about that. So this is the basic mixture that we use: compost, biochar, 1 part each, and 6 parts of stone. This is the basic. If you want to try this, this is what you should use for the first time. Later you can try your own mixes, but start with this mixture. That's the basic thing to use. This is just to compare the difference in the soil on the left side and the biochar compost stone mix on the right side. This picture on the left side is taken 3 days after we made the compactation of the material. It was the same kind of compaction of the materials in the 2 tubes, but after 3 days, the water was still standing on top of the soil that was compacted. But in the biochar compost stone mixture, it was had penetrated the mixture after just a couple of minutes. It's take 3,000 millimeters of rainwater every hour, this stone compost biochar mixture. So it's really a good mixture if you want to handle flooding in a city.
Mhm.
So this is what's happened when you have this open material, stone material. Nothing can stop the root system to develop. So the root system is so massive. It's so many roots that comes from the trees, and when you have so many roots out in the stone material, the trees are not so sensitive to excavation. So if you excavate a root system that contains with small root system in a healthy soil, it will recover the first year. It's not a problem. But you remember the roots that I showed from old planting beds where one root supported the whole tree. It's easy to understand if you take or break a root that support one root that support one tree, that the tree could die. But if you had a root system with thousands of small roots, then you don't have the same problems.
When you see that that sort of cement square with the holes, Todd, do you think that this would be viable for certain trees and not others? I mean, what about trees with very thick roots or older trees? Are they going to be able to penetrate down and around, or is there something?
Well, I think, as Bjorn said, the reality is that the load is being borne by these stones, which means that the key thing is that there's not a compaction of the pore spaces. And so there is this room for the roots to get in between. I think the one limitation is that there's much less space for roots. I mean, you need a lot more of this soil mix than you would if you didn't do this, right? Because much of the area is stone. So there will never be a room for roots in those areas. But the benefit, of course, is that you're providing these pore spaces, which then allows for this soil in between those pore spaces. I think it has a lot of benefits, absolutely. And I don't think the actual type of tree matters that much. It's more that this mixture is correct and there's enough space between the stones. I still have concerns that over the long term that there wouldn't be enough space, just because so much of the space is stones. In this case, looks like over 50%, if not 75%. I don't know, Bjorn could speak to that, but we have problems here in Toronto where they use structural soil, and then in about 15 years, there was no soil left because the roots had taken up all the void spaces. And so now they don't use this for the most part. They use silvicells.
Plastic boxes in the ground. How could you excavate in the plastic boxes in the future? I don't know. It's so stupid for me. I mean, it's so environmental catastrophic thing to use plastic in the ground. When we're fighting climate change and you start to talk about plastic in the ground in a city, I don't know if you understand how a city works, how you build cities, how the city is living. I mean, it must be possible to excavate. You can't have plastic boxes in the ground. I mean, it's a massive approach from these companies to try to sell this plastic construction in the ground. I mean, it's for me, it's just without any thinking. You don't think about the future if you use plastic boxes in the ground.
Who does?
This it's a company that's selling plastic boxes as a solution for hard surface in cities, because they say you must have soil And I can show you how many pictures as you want to, that you don't need ordinary soil for trees to grow. There is happily growing in stone materials everywhere around the world. And some of the best growing situations in China, in mountains of China, it's just stones. So it's ridiculous that people start to say that it won't work. This is the most extreme thing if you really want to protect yourself from flooding. You have these open stone material mixers in the bottom, and it's 50 to 60 centimeters down to the bottom, and you infiltrate all the street water, all the sidewalks water, everything into this one. And in the end, the water will go out to the Baltic Sea when it has filtered through these plant beds. So this is also a solution if you don't want to have flooding in the cities. And this is really extreme, and it grows so fast in these kind of solutions in Stockholm.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I get a bit upset when you start to talk about company names in situations like this, because it tells me a lot of how strong they are in their propaganda about what you should use, and it's always about money. And I'm happy because I have been working for the city of Stockholm, so I haven't need to think about money all the time. Mm-hmm. I could just think, the only thing I think about money is that Stockholm is quite rich compared to other cities in Sweden, so I share everything that we have developed and what we have learned over the years, and we are the first to buy things, and we buy it expensive, and then the prices goes down when we work with it for a couple of years, so everyone can use it.
Canada has promised to plant 2 billion trees, and they're doing it. My fear is they're going to be planting these trees out on long distances from where people are, and nobody is going to be watering them or putting nutrients or anything on them, and they're going to die. And my impression is that unless you really look after trees, the mortality rate's quite high. I've seen some videos lately of places where people have been planting trees along the embankments of expressways and stuff, and 70% of these newly 1-year-old trees have already died. So my feeling is that we ought to be planting more of them in the city, and that we ought to do, it's not what your kind of approach, because you have obviously big chain gangs of people who with equipment digging these trenches and with technology. But I was thinking we should maybe get neighborhoods to be responsible for planting trees along their particular street, or we plant trees along country roads, and where there are enough people so that individuals or families can say, well, that's a tree I planted, and it's up to me to make sure that it's taken care of for the next few years.
Yeah.
So I think the mortality rate might be better, and I think it would also be a very kind and general way of building community. People get acquainted with each other by going out with, and working in on their trees together. But of course, you'd need some ditch digging material and people bringing in compost and mixtures of your macadam and your biochar and your rocks and so on. So tell me, and here's where I want.
I could show you a project that we made with 20,000 cherry trees, where we just planted them in biochar and compost. Yeah. And in small ditches.
I'm thinking, where's Todd? He got
angry.
Yeah.
He got angry
because I reacted. Yeah.
You think so? Oh, I wanted to ask him his notion about how we would plant, have a good urban forest in cities like Toronto, but actually all across Canada. I wanted some notion of the local situation. I'm sorry if he.
I would divide the the 2 billion extra tree project of the Canadian government from the urban tree. I think there's a good argument for urban trees. As you were saying, Meta, that can be maintained by citizens and so on. But that's the scale of that is very small, slight compared to the 2 billion project, which is really mass distribution in. Well, you got, like you say, you're going to lose some, but the survival rate of some trees in certain areas is actually pretty high from planting, like at 70 to 80%, right? So
there is the machine
Mhm.
that made it, and then we refilled it with biochar and compost and stone these ditches, and we made as long ditches as we could, and it was always along highways, and you never know what material is in the ground. So we dug these ditches. It was 5 meters apart, and then we planted 2 cherry trees every meter in this solution. And this is the small plants that we planted, 80 centimeters in this stone mixture. And this is how it looked 2 years ago.
How old are those trees?
What?
How old are those trees we're seeing now?
After 6 years, it looked like this. Yeah.
Wow, wonderful.
And they're extremely healthy. Yeah.
Okay.
And no one has given them water in the last 4 or 5 years. It was just the first years they got extra water, and no extra nutrients, nothing.
Mhm. Okay, well, this is really wonderful. I wish we could go on and talk a little longer, but our time is up. And I hope that this has some influence on what we here in Canada decide to do. That I think that there's a good case to be made for the value of planting more trees in cities in general. And I don't know, I mean, Canada's not that different from Sweden in terms of the environment. No. I presume that it's an expensive thing to do, but you made your case, right? And other countries, Nordic countries are also copying you. Is that the case?
It's so strange to hear about people that say that they stopped growing. I mean, we have done this for more than 20 years, and there's still, as new planted trees in their development, they're still growing as they were newly planted after 20 years. And it's really big trees that still are growing. So I don't know what they did, if they didn't have a good gas exchange, or what the mixture they were using to compact mixture or something like that. It's something that's not right when they talk about structural soil. And I think it's the mixture and the gas exchange and the infiltration of water that don't work in the right way.
Okay, well, we can't solve that right here and now. No. But I just want to thank you very much for this, I found fascinating, adventure into an approach that I don't think any of us had considered before, right, Robin?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it works in old cities. You can do it in old cities, not just in development areas. You can go everywhere and build it. That's good.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So,
thank you.
All right, I'm going to say goodbye. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.